The Doctor of Automobiles is on Supreme Auto Radio Network, 98.9 WGUF. Here's your host, Dr. Johnny.
And welcome back, everyone. Hi, again, I'm Johnny Nacera. And, of course, we're on every Saturday morning from a little after 9 o'clock, right up to 10 o'clock. Of course, we welcome your calls in reference to your automobile. And if you like to sell something at Swap Shop. And also any other questions that we can help you with. That's what the show's all about, really, is helping you. And as life goes on, you're going to find out that the older you get, the more help you want to do to others. My father was very famous for saying, the more you do for someone, the more life will be rewarding. And he said the best gift you can give someone is just to listen sometimes. Well, last week you heard Sony Dimone and how she is so important on inspiring people, to have more self-confidence. And now we have a little bit different edge. Michael Canet is actually a friend of Sony's, but he's also a financial advisor. He has a law degree and a practice in the area of estate planning. He has actually a master's degree in tax, which he said that means he would know too much about taxes, and he's also a financial planner. Mike, are you there?
Hey, Johnny. Glad to be here. You mentioned your grandfather, and a lot of times grandparents do have great insight and wisdom. And one of the things my grandfather told me when I was younger is that God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, and you should listen a little bit more than you talk.
That's a great analogy. I like that. Yeah. Sometimes you talk too much, and I would get that smack across my back of my head too.
Yeah, well, I got a couple of those myself. But again, that just the wisdom that's passed down from generation to generation. Sometimes it takes us a few years to actually recognize how important, my grandparents and your grandparents, how important they were, and the things that they told us. It's actually surprising that the things that come back later in life that you said, it's those aha moments. Wow, you know what?
Yeah, I totally agree, Mike. But the truth of the matter is, what happened to that?
What happened?
Yeah, what happened to that? I don't think you see the families getting together at 2 o'clock and having the pasta dinners and doing things together. Like today's, it's quite differently. Everybody seems to be running. They got to go here. They got other things to do, and it seems like the family has taken a back step.
Well, and to some extent, I think that's also our, that generation's fault as well. They instilled in us this desire to do more and more. Every generation has done better and better, and our grandparents were no different. And they pushed us, and unfortunately, it pushed us to the point where it takes mom and dad both working full time to raise a family nowadays. The cost of raising teenagers is just astronomical. And anybody out there that has I have 2 teenage boys, and you know what? They eat you out of house and home. So unfortunately, that has happened. But at the same time, I think families have tried to go back, that nostalgia side, tried to go back to find something, even if it's not the traditional Sunday dinner, but try to find that something where they have some tradition, whether it's Tuesday night with dad or whatever it happens to be, because it is important. You're right; it is important, and it is missing.
Now, you're. There's no question that, as you mentioned, the family is important, and I think that's where the heart of everything is. And maybe you're 100% right that we've lost that when the woman of the family, who has always tried to keep the family together, is now faced with making a living and putting food on the table, and with dual incomes because you just can't make it on a single income. Now,
well, no, I think that's exactly it.
Yeah. Well, how have you helped people with your? You said you had a different approach, not like most of the financial planners that want you to do A, B, and C. Your approach is a little bit different. Tell us about it.
Well, I think what happens is most people go through life working with some sort of financial advisor, giving them advice, all based upon how much risk can you tolerate. I mean, that's like the cornerstone of the industry is how much risk can you tolerate and how many years do you have before you need the money. But it's all based on this tolerance issue. And from our perspective, why would you take a risk that you don't have to take? Just because you can absorb the risk, just because you can drive 90 miles an hour in a Ferrari doesn't mean you should. If you could, so it's one of those things that we look at it as say, take the risk that you have to take in order to accomplish your goal. And it's a different mindset for most people. There's so much commercials, the Fidelities and the MetLifes and all those guys always on television, pushing, risk, invest. And the fact is that over the last 10, 11 years, if you think about it, if somebody told you up front you were going to lose money 50% of the time and 40% of the time you'd lose 25% or more of your money, who takes that type of risk? Nobody would do that.
No, of course not. But isn't because of the times that are today, for foreclosures, people living on food stamps, 23 million people out of a job. Are people really worried about financial planning, or they're worried about just putting food on the table?
Well, I think it's both, Johnny. I think it's depending on your age. The people that are 25 to 35 to 40 are worried more about food on the table. The people that are in their 50s and 60s are worried about how the heck am I going to retire, and the people in the 60s and 70s are worried that do I have enough money? And oh my God, my children! What's going to happen to my children? As the tail end of the baby boomers, my biggest fear was always, how was I going to take care of my parents as they age? My parents were, blue collar, working class people, and how they never saved enough money that if nursing homes and expenses of old age came into play, they wouldn't be able to take care of themselves. So for us, it was always about how do I worry about them. And when you go into retirement, you're supposed to be thinking about, here's my golden years. But I think a lot of retirees, people in their 65, 75, 80 years old, now are worried about, oh my gosh, my children, what's going to happen to my kids? So it impacts everybody, every generation in a different way, but it impacts us across the board.
Well, I think you're 100% right. I think it's actually gotten to a point where I'm not sure the 65-year-olds are worried about their children at this point. A lot of them, because what they lost in the stock market or whatever, repossessions, what goes on, are now worried about themselves and not worried about their children, which, that seems like a whole new problem.
Well, and yes, they're worried about themselves, but I think parents being parents, we always worry about the kids. I was having lunch yesterday with just some stranger. I mean, we were sitting by the pool after a conference, and I was talking with him, and we were discussing. I have a 21-year-old son, and he has decided that college isn't the right fit for him, and it takes boys a little bit longer. And I love him to death, but I told him that if you're not going to school, if you're not going to school, you're working and paying rent, and you pay rent at home, you pay rent out someplace else. But Michael, I love you, but you'll sleep in your car, you'll sleep under an overpass before I will let you live in the house. Now I don't know that I could actually, if he called my bluff, I don't know that I could actually make him do that. But for me, it was a different experience than Ken, the gentleman and his wife I was talking to, because he has daughters. So for as parents, we're always looking out for our kids, and we're always thinking, how do we protect them and look after them? And I don't think that changes just because I'm concerned about my own future now. I think even a 65-year-old is still worried. I don't want my child, because they're still my little baby. I don't want them living on the streets.
Do you think it's gotten to a point where a 21-year-old now really needs a trade rather than just continuing on getting their master's degree, and then, gosh, they get their master's degree and they still can't find a job?
Well, there is that. I mean, that's the whole cycle of the economy, and it's interesting if you go back over the last 10, 12 years and listen to the news about what's going to be happening this decade from 2010 to 2020. What's going on now? It's been discussed for the last 20 years, so it shouldn't be a surprise that we can't find jobs and that our young kids are racking up. You want to talk about the next bubble, the real estate bubble, the .com bubble. Wait till all these student loans come due. These kids are not going to be able to afford the billions of dollars of student loans outstanding because you know what? They can't find a job. And when they do, because unemployment is so high,
They'll be
new
strapped.
jobs are, the new jobs are paying less and less and less. You can't raise a family. And this goes back to your original point. It's going to be even harder for a man and a woman to raise a family and have an opportunity to have somebody, be it the wife or the husband, stay home and raise babies. You just can't do that. And we need babies. That's our problem.
Yeah. All right, Mike, what's your approach to this younger generation with all the problems we just discussed as a financial advisor?
Well, and that goes back to setting realistic expectations. And I think for, the 25 to 35, 40-year-old, they need to recognize that life is different now, and it's going to be different for the next 10 or 15 years. And it's what your grandfather told you, and it's what my grandfather told me. You got to start saving early, and you have to take care of yourself because there's no more of those pensions. They just don't exist anymore. You're not going to find a job like our grandparents did, where they got a nice little pension. They weren't rich, but there was enough to pay and keep a roof over their heads. Social Security will be there in some form, but it shouldn't be something they can rely on. So
You're right. Absolutely right. And I remember my father teaching my brother and I that, if you can't make a living doing something, get that shovel over in the corner and dig a ditch because you can always learn how to dig a ditch and at least put food on the table. But is that such a thing today now?
Well, I think that we as parents have conditioned our kids to some extent that that's not their job, unfortunately. That they're supposed to get an education, and we've educated ourselves out of work. That's really the problem.
Wow.
We are so many kids have college education.
I never heard I never heard it put that way. But boy, that really hits a stone.
But think about it. Nobody wants to do common day labor. Nobody wants. Trades. If you think about the trades, the unions and the trades, that to me is still. If you're a master plumber or a master electrician, those are still the equivalent of a college education from my perspective. But we don't have the kid who gets out of high school and just does day-to-day work anymore. You just don't get that because as a society, we put such a price on higher education, which is wonderful. It makes us very, very educated. But you know what? There's only so many jobs there for that level of education, and we just don't have enough of them.
Well, that's scary. But all right, so you're saying that even though things are kind of tough, you still in that 25 to 35 age range, that you still need to make what they call an egg basket.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You still have to put away money, so that you have a nest egg for down the road. And the thing is that if you're 25 or 30 years old, you really can withstand the ups and downs of the market. And just from a demographic point of view, from an economic point of view, by the time we get to 2020, 2021, 22, the economy will be changing pretty significantly in a positive manner from my perspective. And that just has to do with who's spending money when. But at 20, 25 years old, you have 30 or 40 years to systematically put away a little bit of money. Go buy Apple, buy one share of Apple and just do dividend reinvestments. Go buy a Procter & Gamble, go buy an Exxon, go buy these nice, even if it's $25 in a mutual fund, go buy something where you're constantly putting away a little bit of money.
You'd be surprised you'd be surprised how that builds too.
Compounding is our friend.
No.
It's a wonderful thing. But the difference is a 25-year-old has 10, 20, 30 years to wait. A 65-year-old does not have 10 years to wait for the market to come back to to spend money. We call that moving to a new neighborhood when you lose 30 or 40% of your portfolio.
Well, that actually happened here in Naples. After most Naples resident and homeowners have actually lost 50% of the value of their homes down here.
It's been horrible down there.
Oh, so I mean, how do you advise these people who already lost their investment in their home, and some of them are upside down?
Well, and the fact is that, and this is always one of those scary things, and people don't like to hear this. You can look at being upside down in your house from a couple different perspectives. You can look at it as an emotional thing where I don't want to lose this house, or you can look at it from a strictly financial point of view. At 65 years old, if you're upside down 50% in your house and you don't need, you're not as worried about your credit scores anymore, you know what? Walk away. There's nothing wrong with walking away. It's so ingrained into us that we can't walk away from our house because we have this financial responsibility. I get that, and I respect that. But the flip side to it is if it's so bad, if it's such a bad deal for you, you have to be able to say, this is a physical thing, and it's okay to walk away. And you know what? You can, before you walk away, go get a great house for 50 cents on the dollar that will appreciate at its normal 1 or 2%, and 10 years from now, you'll be positive. But right now, if you're still making a mortgage payment on a house that's upside down, you're not getting out from underneath that thing. It's never coming back to its full value again.
That was paid for it. That's exactly what I was going to ask you. There's no such thing as just waiting until the market changes?
You know what, Johnny? I'm 50, and I don't know how old you are, but housing prices aren't coming back in our lifetime. If you think about this, there are 78 million baby boomers. We're 43% of the working population. We all bought the biggest house we're ever going to buy already. That was by age 50. We all bought our second homes. That's already happened for all of us as well. There's not enough of them, the people coming up underneath us from behind us, there's not enough of them to buy our houses. So even if you wanted to downsize, we represent almost 50% of the working population. There's not enough of them to buy our houses. I mean, we know from Social Security there's not enough of them coming up, right? We know that.
I know.
So if there's not enough of them to pitch into Social Security to keep it sustainable, why do we think there's enough of them to buy our houses?
Sure sounds scary to me, though.
It is scary. It is scary. And that's why, we always make the analogy that, the person that helps you get to retirement, that's your pediatrician. That's your family doctor. By the time you get to retirement, you need a pediatrician. You don't. You need a cardiologist. You want the specialist to work with just retirees to understand estate taxes, understand income taxes, understand the special needs that America's retirees have on how to protect and preserve what they've spent their whole lifetime earning. I mean,
Sure.
this is their whole lifetime put together, and they watch 30, 40% disappear over the course of 6 months.
Sure. Now, this is where your expertise comes in, where you have, you have your parents that own a so-called piece of real estate that's worth X amount of dollars, and they're leaving this to their children. And then if they don't have enough insurance, it sounds like estate taxes will eat that investment right up.
Well, I mean, think about this. You're leaving a house that's upside down to your kids. I mean, fortunately, your kids aren't on the hook for the debt, but you're not leaving them much of a nest egg, leaving them that upside-down house. But, everybody hates the idea of buying life insurance, but if you want to leave a legacy, if you want to pay taxes, life insurance is the best way to do it because, really the only thing we're sure of in life, there are death and taxes, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, we've heard that old adage.
Right.
So
now what's your advice? To get enough life insurance to pay for the taxes that are going to be due on the property to the children?
Well, fortunately for most Americans, if you do just a little bit of planning, you won't have an estate tax due for most Americans. Even when the estate tax was $1 million, I know we see all that stuff in the news about killing small farms and killing small businesses. But the fact is, with just a little bit of planning and a little bit of thought ahead of time, you don't pay estate tax. Less than 2% of Americans pay estate taxes when it was at the $1 million range, let alone at the $5 million range.
Right. Isn't there also a dollar figure that you don't pay sales tax on?
Oh,
The first
inheritance tax,
yeah,
estate tax on?
first 500,000, is it?
Well, so at the federal level right now, it's a little over $5 million, and January 1st it goes back to $1 million. So for people that right now that have more than a couple $1 million worth of net worth, between the houses and life insurance and investments, you have a small window of opportunity here. Basically, you have less than 2 months left in order to, because you can give away today, you can give away $5 million without any tax implications whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that you give $5 million to your 30-year-old kid. What I'm saying is you can set up a trust today that you still control, but isn't subject to estate taxes when you pass away. So
Mike, you're talking all these great things right now, and how can anyone get in touch with you, by the way?
The easiest thing to do, my phone number is 866-597-1040. Again, 866-597-1040. And my last name is Canet, C-A-N-E-T, C-A-N-E-T. If you go Google my name, you'll find me everywhere.
Great. Mike, we're running out of time here, and I really, really appreciate you calling. I think you gave some good advice to our listeners, and maybe we should chat. We should chat again.
Absolutely, Johnny. It was a pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Have
Mike.
a great day.
Okay, that was Mike Canet, and he's given us some really good information, as you got some information from Sony Dimone last week. And so we try to diversify the show as much as we can.